Welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to Gaming. And I believe we are live. Well, I certainly hope so, because I've started talking. And we are here yet again for another character creation video. This time we are dressing Wraith the Oblivion, my favourite of the World of Darkness games. And why are we talking about Wraith the Oblivion and doing character creation for this particular game? Well, I will tell you. The reason we are is because there's a sale on right now. Onyx Path have got a 90% off sale of Wraith the Oblivion and Changeling the Dreaming 20th Anniversary Edition books, currently over on Drive-Thru-RPG. You can get 90% off every single Wraith book, every single Changeling book that is in the 20th Anniversary Edition line. Now, it's obviously a smaller selection than existed for Werewolf and Vampire, whose sales have now concluded, but that doesn't mean we're not going to do a character creation video. And honestly, it feels good to do a character creation video for Wraith, because I've not spoken about Wraith enough. Wraith is one of my favourite games, and it is also a game that I am running for my Patreon group right now. I've got, well, I say Patreon group, I've got 5 Patreon groups on the go, and one of them is playing Wraith. And you may wonder, Matthew, or Gentleman Gamer if you want to be formal, sir, how is it? You can call me Daddy if you like. The only reason I say that is because on my professional profile on Facebook, my profile picture was, I think, Devil Daddy or Evil Daddy, which is one of our full-page pieces from They Came From Camp Murder Lake, which is based on that poster is based on The Stepfather, which is one of my favourite slasher movies that too few people have seen. Anyway, we're talking about Wraith the Oblivion, not about Evil Daddy. So you may be asking, Matthew, how is it that you can run 5 different games a month, plus whatever you're running for your friends, which tends to be Eclipse phase right now? And I have to tell you, it can be tricky. The general tip I have is keep notes and have good players that keep notes, because that helps you remember things from game to game. The fortunate fact of the matter is that I've been running games for long enough now that I've become pretty good at improvising. So that means I don't spend days preparing games in advance. I just tend to run them using an assembly of notes, and I can improvise the rest. As long as I stay on track toward what the plot is, things seem to go pretty well. But obviously it depends on groups anyway. Anyway. The only reason I started talking about this is because on Patreon right now I'm running Wraith the Oblivion. I'm also running Vampire the Dark Ages. I'm also running Werewolf the Wild West. I'm also running Cthulhu by Gaslight. And I am also running The One Ring 2nd Edition, which is a game very much out of my bailiwick, but I'm giving it a go. We've just started, and that's good fun. Anyway, that's my Patreon. If you want to play a game, you can back it. I think it's linked below. But that isn't why we're here. The reason we're here is to talk about Wraith the Oblivion 20th Anniversary Edition, because there is a sale on right now. You can get every Wraith 20 book on Drive-Thru-RPG for 10% of its regular cost. It is linked below. 10% of its regular cost means I think you can buy all Wraith books for the 20th Anniversary Edition line for probably less than $5. Certainly less than $10. That's pretty good going. So yeah, do check that out if you know what's good for you. Anyway, Wraith the Oblivion. So we've never created a character of Wraith before on this channel, and that's sad because, as I say, Wraith is my favourite of the World of Darkness games. I find it is a game of immense, hope and introspection. It is one of the games that creates the most, player engagement that I've ever found out of a game. It's the game that really got me into the World of Darkness, and as you all know, the World of Darkness has always been very important to me as a role player. And the sheer potential for what you can come up with as a character in a game of Wraith is, of course, endless, because all of your characters, theoretically, have started as mortal, and then they've died. And all of us in the world are mortal, whether we like that reality or not. And at some point we will die, and we will all live different lives, and the likelihood also is we have known someone at some point who has died. And obviously that can be an incredibly well, incredibly moving, incredibly sad event. It can also sometimes come with mixed feelings of relief, of gladness that suffering may be at an end, that people can move on. Death is, of course, the eternal truth that we must all live with, not to get too philosophical about it. And with that in mind, when you create a character for a game like Wraith the Oblivion, you have all of the myriad ways someone can die, ways someone can live, and hopes and dreams unfulfilled that that person could have left this mortal coil with to play. In some ways, at a conceptual level, Wraith works best, and this is just purely a narrative opinion, as a one-on-one game, because it can be quite difficult to justify why multiple characters who have died in multiple different ways and have lived multiple different lives would stick together. They've all got different reasons for hanging on. Again, at a conceptual level that makes sense, but I think when you start forming your circles of wraiths and they realise that this new world that they've entered, this world that they didn't even know existed, the Shadowlands, the Underworld, is utterly foreign and hostile to them, and so they need to find common cause. They need to find reasons to work together, and different characters can facilitate other characters' settling of fetters or upholding of fetters, and settling of passions or protecting each other's passions. And you form new bonds after death that you never thought you could have. This can be especially moving if you play a character who happened to have been a loner, or someone who died, could have died alone, could have died forgotten, and may have felt in life that they had no one, but in death they can find people who are like them. And yeah, I mean, I could wax lyrical for hours about Wraith the Oblivion, and in some cases I have, usually in bars at conventions. And it's a game that I am very glad to have worked on. It was the first core rulebook I contributed to, in fact, as an RPG writer, was Wraith 20. And as luck would have it, as coincidence would have it, the chapter, I think one of the chapters I wrote for Wraith 20 was the character creation chapter. And so that is the chapter we will be referring to. And what's particularly strange about that is I don't think I've read that chapter since I submitted it. You know, I think you find it's the case a lot of the time with people who work in creative fields. They don't tend to like to revisit things that they have done, usually because by the time it gets released, they feel they have improved as a writer or as a developer or as an artist or a musician or actor or whatever it is they happen to be. So it's going to be interesting for me to revisit work that I did, I guess, in 2014, 2015. So we will be doing that. And let's have a look right now at and see. Who do we have here in the chat tonight? Well, we have Logan Cole with his greetings. Thank you very much, Logan. Greetings to you as well. Miss Z, or Miss Z, says, I've not looked much into Wraith or Changeling. Well, hopefully, Miss, we will have an opportunity to visit Changeling, the Dreaming 20th Anniversary Edition, later this week, if time allows. I am obviously someone who has quite a lot of work on my plate at any given time, but I was determined I would get a Wraith character creation video in to celebrate the sale that's going on right now for Wraith and Changeling, and if I can, I will do a Changeling 20 character creation video too before the sale is done. And Miss, you've also said that Vampire the Dark Ages is a game you want to try. Well, our Chronicle now has been going for well over a year, and this is for some of my Patreons. What have they done? They have tried to burn down a chantry. They've made an alliance with a mage to literally wipe some Tremere out of existence. They tried to free the gargoyles. They have attempted to exorcise a demon. They have resulted in a baron fleeing his territory for fear of death, not from them, but from his prince. They've been busy. They haven't always stuck to the plot, but they have been very busy, and I think the players have been enjoying themselves. If you're interested in playing any of my games, do check out the Patreon. Bob's Dungeon says, this is my favourite game in the old world of Darkness. Mine too, but I have only gotten to play a Wraith twice, 20 years ago, and ran it once. That's one of the strange things about Wraith the Oblivion. It's probably the game I hear about most from players who say, I've really wanted to play Wraith, but I've never had an opportunity. And I always think the number of people that have wanted to but have never had the opportunity mustn't have ever looked on chat rooms, forums, Discords, whatever, because if these people all exist simultaneously, I'm sure they can get a game together, but often it takes getting over that hump of someone being prepared to run it. It's not a difficult game to run by any means, but I'm very conscious of the fact Wraith is a game that people often bemoan they never get a chance to play, and then they never take that extra step. And I'm not saying this is the case for you, Bob, but I sometimes feel like, and it's not just role players, but you will get people who will complain that something isn't happening for me, and it isn't because they aren't going out and getting it. It's often because it isn't coming to them. And when it comes to role playing, I think sometimes you have to kind of make that opportunity. You have to set up that skeleton, that structure, and sometimes that means you have to plan out a game, you have to write out a chronicle, and you have to have it ready, because at some point you're going to be able to assemble 3 or 4 or 5 players, and then you can run. Anyway, Chris Saunders says, afternoon all. Good evening, Chris. Little shitpost said, big up GG. James Ellsbury says, evening all. Danny says, haven't played Wraith since the 90s. And yeah, there will also be a Changeling stream with any luck. Will Howard says, evening GG. Wrote a Wraith into my vampire game set in 1820s New Orleans. Looking forward to getting a better idea of building another character. Crimson Angel says, hail Moloch. Well, that always bodes well, doesn't it? Using Wraiths in our games as Barley, it fits perfectly. Yeah, I imagine Barley leave a lot of Wraiths behind. DG, you're nervous about playing with people online. All I can say to that is they are going to be as nervous as you, especially if everyone is new to a group. What you really need is a session where you just get to know each other. You don't just jump straight into a game. You don't have pre-generated characters. You just get into a Discord and you start chatting. Don't go on camera. You can do it all over voice, and that works perfectly well. And as soon as you get chatting, especially about role-playing games, what games do you like, what games don't you like, as long as no one's warring over editions, things tend to come together. Good evening, frequent flyer there, Velvet Tea Cake. And now we get on to character creation. So, I think I've got more people watching right now than I've actually played Wraith in the last year. Maybe that will change. Maybe with this video, that will change. So, my last call before I start getting into this character creation is... the reason we're doing this is because right now, Wraith the Oblivion 20th Anniversary Edition and all associated books has got 90% off its price. It's down to 10% of its price. You can buy the entire Wraith 20 set for, I think, less than $10. Which is pretty damn good, especially when you consider the size of Wraith 20 here. It's not a small book, but it is my favourite of the 20th anniversary books, next to Werewolf. The two W's are very close to each other in importance for me. So, let's have a look at our character sheet. And if you want that sale, want to take advantage of it, it is linked right below for you. So we have our character sheet here, we have our name, we have our player, we have our chronicle. We'll leave those blank, I think, for the time being. And then we have our nature, demeanour and shadow. And we will leave those blank for the time being, because the first thing we're going to look at, just like we did for Vampire, just like we did for Werewolf, is concept. And a part of the concept for a game of Wraith is to think of a character's life, death, and regret. What were they in life? What were they in death? And what is their chief regret? Now, we may tie their regret into their fetters, their passions, but allow me to read from my book. The book I contributed to, and this was content that I wrote. So, let's see what I came up with when I contributed to Wraith the Oblivion 20th Anniversary Edition. Who were you in life? We have, for instance, the options. Addict. Whether your fix was drugs, alcohol, cigarettes, sex or danger, your addiction came to define you. Part of you loved the thrill each time you fulfilled it. The other part was filled with self-loathing and a desperate desire to be free. Life after death offers you the greatest highs, or the possibility you'll be hooked forever. Artist. Many artists receive recognition only after they expire. Perhaps you want to ensure your reputation beyond the grave. Or they came from beyond the grave. Or maybe someone's intent on stealing your unseen work and claiming it for their own, something you cannot allow. God, I'm a good writer, aren't I? Blank slate. You can't recall your life, or at least your real life. You see fragments of a picture, but you don't know how many of them are real, or how they fit together. You're intent on discovering the mysteries surrounding your life. Who were you? And so it goes on. Cop, crook, dabbler, guardian, nomad, official, prisoner, revolutionary, slacker, true believer, victim, and workaholic. Lots of different interesting lives we could look into there. So let's have a think, shall we? Which life appeals to us? As always, our character creations are collaborative. I like the sound of things you come up with. I don't want to take the lead necessarily. But knowing that we've only just started with character creation, let's set something up. Let's set it up so that our character has had an interesting life. I don't want a character who has been stuck in the corner of an office all their life and has never met people, has never had any aspirations, has always been a loner. Because while those characters can actually be very interesting in Wraith, because again, that Wraith gives you a second chance at life, it's not the kind of character I'm interested in making tonight. So, what do we think? We want someone who's had an interesting life. Maybe a prisoner. That could be good. Someone who was a prisoner when alive. A paranormal investigator, Crimson Angel? I'm thinking not for paranormal investigator, because I don't want too much crossover inherent in the character. James Ellsbury says, a religious con artist who feels guilty. You are getting the adjective, noun, who verbs right in there, James. That's what I like to see. Religious con artist who feels guilty. That is excellent. Jason Schmidt says, someone sporty, maybe a stunt performer. That could be good, and I can imagine how that person probably died as well. Failed actor who had criminal connections, says Keegan Sullivan. And Lyshote says, hello. Let's see. So here was an interesting thing. Danny Boom saying, I actually think I playtested Wraith. Oh, I should say, as I'm guessing you are Danish, Danny, I should be saying hi, of course, or god aften. Jasnaka in Smuldansk. Jalera, I think. Jalera. Dansk? No, Jaeler Dansk, maybe. I don't know. I'm still learning. I'm learning Danish bit by bit. It's I'm much better at reading it than I am at speaking it right now, but I'm starting to get the potato in the mouth accent of someone probably from Jutland. So anyway, thank you very much, Danny. You knew what I was talking about. Yes, you playtested Wraith in the beginning of '94 when Mark, presumably Reinhagen, brought it to a con in Denmark. Can't remember what it was about though. Back then, Danny, I think you'll find. Wraith's initial name was Inferno, I think. No, it was going to be Inferno, then it became Ghost, and then it became Wraith. And from what I remember when I ran Wraith, you believe in for Mark, he actually said to me he had never actually played it, which blew my mind, the idea that you could be the developer of a game. It turned out he wasn't the developer, I think it was Jennifer Hartshorn, but that you could conceptualise a game and then never actually get a chance to play it. I'm not suggesting that this is the best way to do things, but I kind of insist on playing the games that I write, or running them, well, or both ideally. I don't think there's anything that I have developed that I haven't both ran and played at some point, because it helps me understand the game. I can't see its flaws unless I'm sort of in the trenches. Anyway, back to character creation. So, anyway, what do we have here? A Wetworks operator who wants redemption, says Chris Saunders. That's a nice one. Very dramatic. A fraudulent ghost whisperer. That would be great irony. Well, we've got a few things here that connect up. So, because what I like is James Ellsbury says a religious con artist who feels guilty. Keegan says a failed actor who had criminal connections. And we also have a fraudulent ghost whisperer. So I think we are going to have a religious con artist. This is a bit of a complicated one. Ghost whisperer. Yeah, what else? Religious... Yeah, with criminal connections. Why not? Okay, well, with crim, we'll shorten that too. So, this person was religious, lapsed. This is a long concept. Lapsed religious con artist. Ghost whisperer. I think con artist and ghost whisperer can go hand in hand there, so we'll just go lapsed religious ghost whisperer with criminal connections. So this was a fraudster. This was someone who was defrauding people. I think we could even put in a bit of the acting part where this character was maybe on TV doing a bit of the, oh, I can feel your father's spirit humming inside me, that kind of Derek Acora bullshit. So we will go for this. We'll go for that. Now, the big question: how did this character die? So, yeah, DG, religious ghost whisperer, so something close to an exorcist. I think so, but not an exorcist. This is just someone who claimed to be able to channel. Medium. There, we're going to make it fit a little better. Lapsed religious faux medium with criminal connections. Yes, so, how did this person die? So we've got some examples that I wrote in Wraith 20 here. And in fact, I want to read some of these. Tripped on a prop during a bit and broke their neck on stage. That would be fun, wouldn't it? So we have accident. Fate is fickle. You were on your sleepy commute to work when the train you were on derailed and crashed, snuffing you out in a welter of tangled metal. I vaguely remember writing that bit. I think I may have had pancaked you or something like that in a concertina of metal. And the developer, Rich Dansky, changed it. It was such a cruel surprise for someone with so much to live for. Bitter you feel you deserve better. When that is, you'll find out soon enough. That's good, I like that. Elements. You may have considered yourself green, but nature didn't care. Tornadoes, it turns out, don't play politics. Your death could be philosophised away as the natural order of things, but that didn't offer much solace as you hit the ground at speed. Illness. Some illnesses are predestined by genetics, others strike without warning. Your agonising end put things into perspective. Mystery. Your death came as a complete shock. You don't know what happened. Maybe you weren't alone when it occurred. Got old age, overdose, something strange, violence. So what do we have here? What are people suggesting? So we have got... tripped on a prop during a bit and broke their neck on stage. That might be a bit amusing. On the toilet, says John Wassinger. That's very much... That happens, we know that happens. Strain too hard, give yourself an aneurysm. Polyester says the mob finally got him. Maybe he defrauded the wrong person. You said you were talking to my mother? No one knows where my mother's buried. You won't be the first. Bang! Kind of thing. I don't know why our mobster is someone from Bugsy Malone, but I guess why not? Why not? He died old, alone, and full of regret, says Danny. Huh. That's actually quite nice. I quite like that. Die by revenge by someone he conned. Well, they're a con artist, maybe at the end of some conflict. In jail while awaiting his bail hearing. Couldn't pay back criminal connections. Pissed off a real mage who came to debunk him. Will Howard says a mob boss discovered he was a fraud. Lots of mob ties here. Died from COVID, said Zachary Moses. Very topical, yeah. Allergic reaction to stray peanut. Now we're getting silly. A character you made from the past killed him. Could be our werewolf from the last character creation session, couldn't it? Elvis did indeed die on the toilet with a hamburger in his hand, Ian Watson, just the same as Mama Cass died with a sandwich in her mouth. So supposedly not. Yes, You Dream, we will hopefully make a Changing the Dreaming 20th Anniversary Edition character creation session with any luck. It depends if time allows. There's lots of work to do. Anyway. So, we've had a lot of excellent suggestions. and I love that everyone wants to go for mob ties, but I am and people are still coming up with things, but I love Danny's very subtle, died old, alone, and full of regret. Because his death did not have to relate to his life. What this tells us now is this person who lost religion, pretended to be a medium, had criminal contacts, may have even done well for himself, but died old, alone, and full of regret, probably because he was a fraudster and drove everyone away. Thank you very much. I think that's a Good Place reference there from Agent 29416. Killed by Elvis. Isn't Elvis a son of discord in a fan supplement for Vampire the Masquerade? Regret then. So what is this person's regret? So checking this chapter, what I wrote for Wraith 20. Confusion. You weren't the only one to die in that accident, so why are you the only one here? Failure. Whatever it was you were trying to do in life, you failed. Guilt. You did a bad thing. Legacy. Love. Missed chances. Mission possible. Need to understand. Resentment. Revenge. Unfulfilled destiny. Unrevealed truth. What are we thinking? Why is he still here? I mean, guilt is an obvious one to go for if he basically screwed people over in life. Legacy. Maybe unrequited love. I don't know, that can always get a bit creepy, can't it? Especially the fact that he's old and alone. Never connected with his children or provided them with them. Jason Schmidt knocking them out of the park right now. Never connected with his children or provided for them when he wanted to. Guilt and the sudden regaining of religion in the afterlife. Wants religious redemption. Told parents the wrong thing about their dead daughter. It destroyed their lives. Keegan, just like that, you have won. You have won there. Told parents the wrong thing about their dead daughter. It destroyed their lives. I mean, we're going to say lied to the wrong people. Lied to two innocents. And this completely drove him into a guilt spiral. And I think the thing a lot of other people are suggesting right now, Danny again coming in with some gold. He always thought he could be a good man. And then he destroyed the lives of two parents. Maybe he claimed that, God, let's go a bit dark. Maybe he claimed that their daughter had been missing for a long time. And he claimed that he could speak to her. And that she was in a better place. He gave her some platitude, you know? And so they moved on. They moved. They split up, as parents often do when they lose a child in such a way. It can be very traumatic and very trying on the relationship. And maybe later they discovered he was lying. Maybe later they realised that she'd been kidnapped and hadn't been killed. Maybe she ran away, and maybe she tried to reconnect with them later. By that point, their lives had completely changed. Oh God, this is getting melodramatic. Have a tear in my eye. We do have some other regrets being listed now that are frankly silly. Didn't invest in Bitcoin early enough, says Brendan. No, I don't think he'll regret that. He thought lying about people's family to give them closure, but ended up hurting them more. Yep, that's what we're going for, humanoid cable dreads. You could also go the wrathful route, says Miss Z. I don't like it as much, but it's one idea. If I'm to be a damned soul, then so must those who killed me. Callie says, hi Matthew, came late today, hope everyone's doing good. I think everyone is. I think everyone is really getting into this Wraith character. Said their daughter would return home with enough prayer when she would later be found dead of an overdose. TG, that is dark. That is very dark. Yeah, I think that's what we're going to do. That is it's dark, but I like it. Haha, crypto coin in. This is why we keep you around. So, moving swiftly on. Now we're on to nature and demeanour. Nature and demeanour, as we know, are ways of recovering willpower in the course of Wraith. As the character creation chapter explains, You regain willpower whenever you play your nature. You gain even more willpower if you play your nature while covering it with your demeanour. There's an awful lot of Wraith that is about concealing your true feelings. Perhaps more so than Vampire, because there's a lot of feelings at play, a lot of emotions in the game of Wraith, are right at the forefront. And so wearing a mask, pretending to be something that you're not, is very much front and centre for this game. So, do we have a drop down? We do. And these natures here that I came up with were, these were all ones I added to the book. I remember because I added Pragmatist for some reason. And actually, you know what? Not all of mine are on there, damn it all. Where's my Optimist? Anyway, we need a nature and we need a demeanour. So I think, based on how we've described him, he probably puts himself out as something of an entertainer or mediator. I mean, in very real terms, he put himself out as that, or even a visionary. Yeah, that is, as James Ellsbury says, falling back on the old character. I imagine when he needs to act, he is pretending to be something more than he is. So let's go for... Let's go for... probably leader. I mean, Jester's actually quite good for this one. Or no, well, yeah, we'll go for mediator. So what is his true nature? Other than regret... No, which doesn't really fall into it. What sums up his personality now? I mean, he's guilt-ridden. He's full of regret. How does he actually feel? Maybe it's part of his change. Maybe he's a caregiver now. Maybe he wants to try and help people now that he's passed on. Perhaps he is a martyr in going about in pity for himself. Or maybe he has a visionary. Maybe he's found faith, as we mentioned earlier, in undeath or death, and he can now see a new path for himself. So, Brendan asking, what's the difference between a nature and demeanour? Demeanour is the face you project, and nature is what you are within. Sometimes it can be the exact same thing. But I'm quite liking... I think Pragmatist makes sense, Zachary. XMally28 suggests caregiver. I'm thinking... Yeah, I quite like Pragmatist as his nature. It's still a little hard. It's still a little hard about things. He plays the role of the mediator, but deep within he's very jaded, and I think that's where Pragmatist comes into it. So then we get into the shadow. So this isn't a shadow character creation session, though we can do that at another point. There are lots of different types of shadow that exist in Wraith the Oblivion, and as no doubt most of you know, in a game of Wraith, it tends to be that the player does not play their own shadow. You have a choice. Either the storyteller takes on the role of your shadow, or another player at the table takes on the role of your shadow, as well as their Wraith, and you play someone else's shadow, and so it goes round the table. It's one of those funny things that a lot of people point at Wraith and say, that's why I can't play it, because I don't trust other players. And that's unfortunate, because most of the gaming tables I've ever participated in, the players are trustworthy, they do get on, they do know each other reasonably well, and they wouldn't deliberately screw each other over. But I think part of the reticence that goes into the idea of shadows is partly its time. This mechanic was invented in the early 90s. Back then you didn't have games that put players in the role of more than one character, except things like Ars Magica, where you weren't necessarily whispering in each other's ears and trying to manipulate each other. So by today's standards, when you compare it to some of the funky mechanics in all kinds of indie games that are out there, lots of small press things, from Bluebeard's Bride to Alice is Missing to things that are really reshaping the mould of role-playing games, something as simple as the Shadow is very, very basic. But it still has a hold on people. It still makes people think, oh, I don't know, I can't imagine allowing someone to play my character's id or ego or super ego or whatever. So anyway, I just wanted to talk about that a little. I think it's an excellent mechanic. It is very simple and it is very flavourful, but I also understand it's not for everyone. So I just want to tune in and see people's comments now, because we're getting more chat in this one than we did on the werewolf one. Mrs. E says, going to have to go soon. We'll have a very nice evening, Mrs. E. Danny says, dream. Okay, we're still on nature. The Shadow does have another character sheet, Zachary, but it's a slimmed down one. What mechanics do you use for the Shadow? If you're good at RP, you can play your own Shadow. Yeah, you can have different mechanics. You can even have different powers for your Shadow, but it's the same basic system. And I very rarely find metagaming an issue. To be honest, the Shadow should know everything the Wraith knows, so... Yeah. As someone who doesn't know Wraith, what does the Shadow do? So the Shadow is a bit of a manipulator. Well, as you can see from all the different kinds of Shadows here, they encourage your character in different, generally destructive ways. So, for instance, we have the Abuser, who will constantly be gaslighting you and telling you that you aren't good enough to do something, or will be trying to goad you down the wrong path. You've got the Comedian, who will laugh at everything you're doing, make jokes of all your successes, who will also push you to make light of other people's misery. The Director, who is a control freak. The Freak, who is, as the name implies, probably a mixture between a sadist, a surrealist, and a masochist. Although I think you may have the masochist and the sadist in the note. So we have the Hypochondriac. Everything is, of course, the end of the world. It's Oblivion. And you've got lots and lots more. All the different Shadows have, not only do they have different names, they have different powers that go with it. Different traits. A lot of them are detailed in the Book of Oblivion, which is part of the Wraith 20 sale. So you can also get that for 10% of its normal price. That's a book I co-developed. And I was very happy to do so. So what else do we have in the comments? My Dungeons & Dragons players back in the day wanted to ride the metagame to heck or be wacky and sleep with buddy halfling maids. Too goofy for this. You're probably right. It is like a Warlock's Patron, DG. So yeah, we've got a lot of people explain what a Shadow is. That is good. Is there a Karen Shadow? Basically someone who complains and feels... Yeah, probably the victim. Or maybe the parent. Perfectionist, maybe. Yeah, you could call it an arsehole avatar. So the martyr is probably someone who's constantly going to be saying, poor you, well, poor me, I'm stuck with you, you've lied to everyone all your life, you've driven everyone away, and now look at us, you should just throw yourself in the nearest Nile and destroy yourself. And yes, the Shadow is a part of your personality, and it's basically trying to consume you so that it becomes all that's left. By no means is it a replacement for anything that delves into mental illness in a factual, scientific way, but you can associate a lot of these things with issues like depression, anxiety, and so forth. So it can get very heavy. It's arguably the darkest part of the game, because you've got this constant negative voice in your ear, and it's not constant, it's not always going to be there, but at points of stress, it's a little like rolling hunger dice in Vampire the Masquerade. You don't roll hunger dice for every single roll necessarily, or care about every single roll, but at times of stress, the Shadow looms and starts trying to push you in a certain way. I agree with XMally28 anyway. I like the idea of the Comedian because it's trying to undermine his intent, laughing that it's hilarious, he's trying to make a difference when he's a con artist, trying to make light of the situation. I agree completely. I think that is our Shadow. The Comedian. Not the Comedian from Watchmen, though it is a similar kind of nihilistic attitude. So here's an interesting thing before we move on to attributes. The shadow isn't necessarily just trying to get you to end your existence. In fact, most of them aren't. Most of them are trying to drive you to become a spectre. If they destroy you entirely, they will disappear as well. And while they have a certain cancerous quality in that they are trying to consume you, the thing they don't want to do is end your existence, because if they do that, they will no longer exist. Rather, they want to consume you and control you, at which point you become a spectre, which is like an anti-wraith, a dark wraith, who's been consumed by their shadow entirely. Not all spectres were consumed entirely by their shadow. Sometimes they are consumed by external elements or corrupted by external elements to become spectres. And it is possible in the Book of Oblivion for some spectres to be redeemed, though it is very rare. So, and Sean Helton says, do I think a mixed pack of Kindred and Garou could work long term if differences are set aside? Absolutely, there's no reason why not. To be honest, it's entirely up to the storyteller and the players how much that entire worm taint thing comes into it. And I think it's very lazy, this is again personal opinion, for every single werewolf to be completely without reason when they encounter a leech. You know, if they smell worm taint on something, they don't just immediately burst into Krynos form and start cutting it up. There should be some level of, well, this thing is impure, but it might be able to help me take out that thing that's even more impure. And yeah, you're right, Danny, it is all Jungian. There is a fair amount of Carl Jung in Wraith the Oblivion, well, and a lot of the, I was going to say pop psychologists, but a lot of the founders of what's considered, I guess, modern psychology, their theories skew into elements of Wraith the Oblivion. So, now we're on to attributes. It's the 7-5-3 split, as ever. And what do we think this person is going to focus on most of all? Well, they were a faux medium, so I'm thinking that they were a performer. That means social is probably going to go first. John Edwards, Derek Cora, any kind of almost tent revival, stage magician kind of thing. Social should be first. Manipulation makes sense to me. Actually, yeah, because maybe he wasn't most popular in the world, but he was very effective. So we're going 7-5-3. So we currently have 5. I think a good-looking guy. I would if I could click on that damned third dot. There we go. I'm being tormented now by my shadow. So currently we have 2, 5, 6. Let's balance it like that, I think. So we're getting some people saying social, physical, mental. Some say social, mental, physical. There's a lot more social, mental, physical. Yeah, I've not heard John Edwards for a while, DG. I remember at one point, sorry to castigate you to my sister, but my sister was really into that when she was younger. Poor, naive fool that she was. So let's do mental next, I think. It's probably going to be wits and perception. And then I'm happy to do across the board. Actually, he was very old and lone and full of regret when he was older. I think, right, so far, unless I'm very much mistaken, our 2 characters that we've created so far all had physical last. What does that tell us about how we'd like to play characters? I think very slow, ponderous character that in his old age he had his money, retired into a home, maybe put on a bit of weight, lost a bit of mobility. Yeah, all feeds into that self-loathing that this character had. So dexterity is low. A faded celebrity, as Humanoid Cable Dreads says. So let's see, what else do we have here? Arbane says, what are your thoughts and hopes for what might change for Wraith 5th edition when we eventually get there? I have lots of thoughts, Arbane, but I'm keeping them to myself. I mean, I don't know whether I doubt I would be working on it. Paradox are handling most of these things in-house at this point. and I don't think they're going to be approaching me, but there are certain things I would love to see show up, and I don't want to say, just in case I happen to be contacted in any capacity for it. But yeah, there's things I would like to see changed. I think the main one is less focus on the underworld and more focus on the Skinlands. I was not here. The only thing worse for an illusionist to find out there are actual living real magicians. The Shadow constantly mocks him for being a fraud. Very good. Danny says no one said he was a good medium. Could have been rubbish at it. It would need perception for cold reading. Considering character creation streak continues, can we expect Changeling 1-2 before the sale ends, as Pavel? Well, as I pointed out, I'm hoping I'll be able to do one before the sale ends. This sale, Wraith and Changeling, ends next Monday, but very early on Monday, so if you're buying these, I recommend doing it before the weekend. It depends on if I have the availability. So, what else? He had a hit show years ago. Alright then. Thank you, Sean, for asking people to like. That's right, you've got plenty of people watching right now. It's very easy to click that thumb and make the likes go up. I mean, it doesn't translate into anything for me except popularity, but like any starving artist, I do love that popularity. So now we're on to talents, skills, and knowledges. And at this point, I should say, just like every other World of Darkness game, it's 13, 9, and 5. I'm sure if Ian is still watching right now, he will be quick to remind me that Mummy the Curse, not Mummy the Curse, Mummy the Resurrection is 15, 7, 3 or something like that. But no, I'm saying that every World of Darkness game is 13, 9, 5, and that's that. So let's actually have a look. Before I start saying one is got to be more than the other, let's have a look at what skills he would be using. Now, those of you who know me, see if you can identify the ability that I added to this character sheet, because it's an ability I think is integral to every role-playing game, and I hate the ham-fisted way that so many World of Darkness games sort of twist you into a pretzel to get you to use this ability. So if anyone can come up with which one it is and post it in the chat, you win a silver penny. You can subscribe to the channel for free. Yeah, we've got a lot of likes on this, Chris. I was not here. How do I have so many good suits and shirts? You're the first person to actually compliment this shirt. And Jason Schmidt, yes, it is persuasion. Because I get very tired of running games where people say, well, okay, is it really expression? I don't know, is it? Expression is never actually defined as being persuasion in World of Darkness games, but you're not intimidating, you're not leading, you're not listening. So the reason persuasion isn't often included in World of Darkness games, I should hasten to add, is because it would be a stat into which a lot of people would pour dots because you use persuasion a lot. But I think persuasion is good to have. Anyway, and it is a nice shirt. I was not here. Thank you very much for the compliment. The reason I have so many suit jackets and shirts is because when I go out, I tend to wear a suit if I am going out somewhere nice, and I don't like to wear the same suit every time. When I used to work in a profession that wasn't role-playing industry, I would wear a suit to work, and I had a selection of them, and I like to buy nice shirts. Simple as that. I'm more comfortable wearing one of these generally than t-shirt, but you know, it's just a question of taste, and not everyone has it. Anyway, so we are using these abilities to perform basic tasks in Wraith the Oblivion as we would in any other World of Darkness game. So what is useful? I think this guy knows something about enigmas. I'm putting a couple of dots in there. He's going to know something about occult, maybe a little about investigation, and that might actually be enough. That might be enough in knowledges, bizarrely. Okay, I wasn't intending on selecting 1395 at this point, but that may actually do it. What else do we think this character can do? Probably drive. Probably has some etiquette from where he spoke with families. Larceny, he's a con artist. a fraudster, although subterfuge is probably going to be more appropriate there, but we'll do it anyway. Meditation, he at least pretended to pray. Maybe even... performance, definitely. Performance is going to be our 3 dots. And so, what else do we have here? Alertness, athletics, awareness. Awareness makes sense, maybe 1 dot, now that he is in tune with the supernatural. Empathy makes sense. Expression, now that we get to it, expression makes sense. Not interested in intimidation. Persuasion makes sense. And subterfuge makes a lot of sense. So let's see how these dots have fallen. I think we may have ended up over the limit on 1 or more. So we currently have 2, 4, 6, 7, 10 in talents. We've got 3, 6, 9. No, it has actually worked out. We've gone 13, 9, 5. Couldn't have planned it better, could we? I only ever go up to 3 dots at character creation until I get to freebie points, at which point all bets are off and we can start bumping things up to 5 if we want to. It's likely this character is going to end up with a lot of freebie points assigned to these abilities because I think this is going to be a very ability-based character. He is a social manipulator first and foremost, so having things like performance and persuasion and subterfuge high is going to be very useful to him. Yeah, we should make a note about Streetwise. You're right, Jason, because he has a... criminal contacts, so I'm writing note for freebie points. After all, we know that at some point he had criminal contacts. That's the one bit of the character concept right now I'm actually not sure about at this point. You know what? I'm going to drop it. He was a lone fraudster. Doesn't need Streetwise. Let's put those dots somewhere else. So now we're on to backgrounds, and just like every other World of Darkness game, we have 5 background points. But Wraith is a bit special because it has a lot of backgrounds that you may never have heard of before. Did we go for 10, 9, 5? Oh, did I miss some? 3, 6, 9. Okay, so we've got... Oh, yes, of course, we could put 3 more in here. Thank you very much, Danny. Yes, well, in that case, let's put them in... Let's bump these up, shall we? Wow. Hyper-specialised character. I like a specialised character. I really do. Okay, so... I am going to flick through the book briefly, because not all of you are going to know about what these backgrounds are, and as we are selling this book for 10% of its regular price on DriveThruRPG right now, I think it's only fair that I actually tell you a little about what's in it. They could have gone to Streetwise, Keegan, but they didn't, did they? Look at who that is in the picture. Okay, so, looking at backgrounds, of course we have allies, as usual. We have artifacts. So artifacts are something completely different for Wraith. Commonly fueled by pathos, that's one of your flexible traits. Artifacts have certain functions or powers that aid the Wraiths who carry them. Artifacts are highly valuable, greedily hoarded by the authorities in the underworld, Stygia. Any Wraith who chooses the artifact background must create a story explaining reasonably where she obtained the artifact and why she's been allowed to keep it. Is it still only at 12? I thought I'd assign more points. Oh, alright, we're putting 1 in Streetwise. Oh, no, we're not. We're putting 1 in Awareness. There. I'm going to choose an artifact because I think that could be interesting. Contacts. Yes, some of the people that he claimed to have contacted from across the Shroud have reached out to him. Eidolon. So Eidolon is one that most people wouldn't have heard of before. It's a measure of spiritual fortitude. It's an indication of special potential in a particular Wraith to resist the temptations of their shadow. So Eidolon is something that is a little like Generation, in that it doesn't come up all the time. But it's quite important when it comes to things like resistance and showing your power. From my vampire character creation video, you'll know that I'm not a big fan of the Generation background in general, whereas Eidolon I actually find is more useful because it comes up in things like Harrowings, which are some of the events in Wraith the Oblivion where you have to relive certain elements from your past, or your shadow will expose you to horrors and you have to survive them. And while I don't think he's going to have many dots in Eidolon, I think we're going to give him at least one. Haunt is a place that he haunts. I don't think we're going to have that just yet. Legacy. This is going to be a trace of who he was when he was alive. There's so many good backgrounds here. Mentor, not interested in that. Memoriam. The essence of the dead is hard to define, but pathos stems directly from emotion, the emotion that the living feel for the dead is expressed as memory. After all, memory is the way in which the living interact with the dead. People have a tendency to remember those who are lost in strange ways, or to project thoughts and feelings onto those who are no longer there to represent themselves. Memoriam allows the Wraith to access extra pathos. By invoking the feelings the living have for her once per session, a Wraith can roll her Memoriam rating, difficulty 8, with each success granting 1 point of pathos. I could see Memoriam coming up for this character, because they were famous once, so people are remembering them, albeit maybe for the wrong reasons. Notoriety, also quite useful, because it's fame, and this character's famous. Then we have relics, which were objects from the Skinlands that you've brought over to the Land of the Dead, and status. Well, I am happy with the backgrounds that we have now. Maybe I'll add notoriety. And for the time being, I think we will go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And when we get to freebie points, we will bump those up. So let's go back to our character now. And passions, passion. We'll get back to the actual character creation chapter. So, passions, you have 10 dots in passions. And what are passions? Well, passions will actually help govern some of your actions in the game, how strongly you feel and how well you can resist things, the pull of something, let's say in the Skinlands, to pull you through to the Land of the Living. It can also fuel some of your powers, your arcanoi, because passions are one of the integral parts of a Wraith. These are fundamentally the emotions that are keeping you attached to the Land of the Living and not just passing straight into Oblivion. Excuse me. So, for instance, with passions, of course, being more powerful the more dots you have in them, you might have something like protect my family. You might have find my killer. You might have keep people away from my art collection. You might have kill my rival. And every single one of them, you put an emotion next to it. And these come up in the course of gameplay. I do love the passion element of Wraith the Oblivion. I think it's a lot of fun to play with. Bring up at least one passion in every single session of Wraith so that it makes it feel like these passions are important. So, passions don't have to be positive. They can, but they can also be negative. It doesn't matter. You're not punishing a character having a passion. They are tools that allow people to play, and as we mentioned, they fuel other things. So, Fangs, 1978, as being the centre of attention. So, I'm going to change that to Never Forget Me. This person has a... It feels like because they drove everything away in life, they're going to be forgotten. So I'm going to put the emotion there as desperation. Then we can do a few dots in that. Regret from someone he hurt with his fraud. Maybe he drove parents to suicide and a daughter is left behind. Why did the daughter of the couple whose lives I ruined run away and resort to drugs? So yeah, because we ascertained that this person defrauded a couple and ruined their lives. It got twisted around by, I think, DG in the comments here in a very effective way that... I had said that your child is still around, there's still hope, but unfortunately the child had already died. Horrible stuff. So I think we've got to have Please Forgive Me. Please Forgive Me, guilt. That is obviously a driving passion. I think, 4 dots in that. ruined his own family. That was something I really liked the sound of. Someone was initially saying that through his own success that he lost touch with his own child, and there can be some parallels there. Maybe his own daughter is hooked on drugs, and so the fact that he didn't save this other person's daughter or words or something to that effect deeply resonated with him, made him push his daughter away, all kinds of guilt. So reconnect with my... I don't think reconnect's probably a bit strong, he's dead. Protect my daughter. There's probably guilt again, but we're going to put love just to mix it up a little. So we'll have one more, a really minor one. And still lusts for fame. I think we'll do that with Never Forget Me. Xmally28 says perhaps he believed one of the parents may have been part of the crime involving the daughter. Yeah. Do sociopaths and psychopaths become wraiths, says Chris? Yes, absolutely they can. Then something to do with loneliness. Something to do with loneliness. I quite like the sound of that. So his passion is connect with someone. Anyone. This is a cheery character, isn't it? Oh yes, actually I prefer that. I prefer what Jason Schmidt just came up with. Sorry. We're going to have reconnect with religion. And we'll still have it as loneliness. He's driven towards religion because he's lonely. So Agent 29416 has asked how do passions actually play into the game? Well, they're linked to who the character is, and there's actually a lot of mechanical use for passions in the game for doing things like recovering your pathos. Pathos is used for fueling your arcanoi or arcanoi. They can also be used for things like recovering willpower. They can also be invoked as a social or mental or physical trait, to augment a role. There are a lot of points at which a passion forms the crux of play, so they're quite central to the character. So next up we have fetters, and fetters tend to be physical objects, sometimes people, parts of your former life. They can be people, places, or things, as the book says. This might be a book you love, a book you owned and never, maybe you had it since childhood. It was the only thing your father gave you outside of disappointment. I just came up with that on the fly. It could be a car you restored, a creepy shack in which you were murdered. So let's see. You have 10 points to allocate to fetters, and once again, the higher the rating, the more powerful the fetter. Fetters are ways of controlling a wraith, but they're also things that you can draw on to draw strength from them. You don't want them in the Shadowlands, but they become relics at that point and highly sought after by greedy wraiths. But you basically tend to leave fetters in the Skinlands, and they become places you can easily haunt, penetrate the veil between death and life, basically pass through to where your fetter is. So what do we have here? We've got tapes of his old TV show. So yeah, tapes of old TV show. Maybe the only ones. Maybe he was on public access TV. He wasn't as famous as he thinks. Daughter. Yep, makes sense. Letter from the parents of the hurt daughter. Yeah, these are all good ideas everyone's coming up with. Wallet that had his wealth. And family picture. Yes. Wallet containing money and family photo. The only memory he has of it. Daughter and religious texts are two big ones. Oh, his old church or studio. Well, I'm not giving him any dots in haunt, so I'm going to say no to a location in this case. This person's going to haunt objects and people rather than places. Walking cane from his latter life. Picturing an old man drinking himself to death in the home, watching his old show, trying not to think about what he did. I think that is a very good picture of him, Zachary. And you know what I'm particularly pleased with the way this character is forming is a lot of characters you make for the World of Darkness get turned into monsters at a young age. So they're very young, they're very dynamic, they've still got a whole life ahead of them. This guy has lived a life. He died old and lonely with regrets, as Danny put it earlier, and I really like that. I think, yeah, his father's Bible. His father's Bible. Bible. Okay, so we've only got 10 points to spread in these, so I'm going to say that right now this person, the regret seems to hold the firmest place in his heart. I think the wallet is pretty low down. Father's Bible, I think, is going to have more power than he thinks, so that's 7. We'll have daughter there and tapes of his old TV show. There we go. Alright, that's our 10 points. So every character starts with 10 points of corpus. We won't fill it in because you don't want to hear me tap that 10 times. And then we have pathos. So, each Wraith has a starting pathos rating of 5, plus however many dots you have in the memoriam background. Well, we will see, won't we? And just so people are aware of what pathos can do, Arcanoi use pathos. So when you use your special powers, which we haven't even got onto, did I skip Arcanoi? I think I did. You generally spend pathos to use them. They can be used to fuel the powers of artifacts. Once per session, a Wraith can roll their memoriam rating, with each success granting a dot of pathos. A Wraith can roll one of their passion ratings at a time. That passion has been explored, with each success granting 1 point of pathos. Pathos can be used to change direction in the Tempest, which is the sea of the underworld. There's all kinds of uses for pathos. And as for willpower, every character starts with a base of 5 dots. However, that can be increased with freebie points. So let's go back now, shall we, and look at Arcanoi, because somehow we skipped them. So the Arcanoi, or Arcanoi, or Arcanwa, are our disciplines, our gifts, our so on and so forth for Wraith the Oblivion. And they are some of my favourite powers in the World of Darkness, much like everything in Wraith, because they range from the subtle to the extreme in ways that I just really enjoy. They can affect yourself, they can affect your surroundings in a way that is unlike anything else in the World of Darkness, I feel. Some of them are so I'm really a fan of things like keening, which basically gives you like a banshee scream that can tear through the gauntlet, and even though you're doing it from the underworld, people in the living world may hear it and their lives may be shortened by hearing it. You can use things like life web to actually determine when people are going to die, or trace their lives, find their ancestors, find their descendants, things like that, which if you're playing around with things like fetters and passions and trying to interact with your family from beyond the grave, that's really fun as well. There is Moliate, which I guess is similar to Vicissitude in some senses. You can turn yourself into a hideous ghost. If you think of something like in Beetlejuice, when they're warping their features to appear more scary, you can do that, but you can also do that to others. And, of course, unlike in Beetlejuice, you are scary when you do these things. Puppetry allows you to possess, to control other creatures, the living most commonly. And whereas we have, let's see, what else do we have? Inhabit, which conversely allows you to inhabit technology, items, elevators, cars, that sort of thing. I think that's a lot of fun. Outrage, as X-Mally28, allows you to steer other people by their emotions. You can basically charge and discharge people's emotions, change them how you like. Again, they operate on a subtle level that I just really enjoy. So, what are we looking at here then? So Arcanoi are split into common and initiate varieties. We are just going to be going for common varieties at this point. How many dots do we get in there? 5 dots to spread among them. So yeah, our character isn't going to join a guild at this point. So just because that's the political element of Wraith, and right now we're just creating the character. I tend to introduce guilds during play. They're things that characters find their way into rather than starting the game as, but that's just my preferred method of it. So yeah, what do we think? I see Danny is saying easy for me to say, Mnemosyne. Mnemosyne, the Arcanos of Memory. You know, that would actually really work. This character is clearly caught up a great deal in memory. We'll actually go into what each of these powers does shortly. What else did you suggest? Given that this character is clearly quite about trickery and illusion. And then we have Puppetry. See, I'm thinking something that allows communication, working through dreams. Phantasm is allowing you to put images in other people's heads. Outrage, as we mentioned, allows you to exert force on the living. What else do we have? There's so many good ones in this game, that's the problem. I think I'm going to go for Phantasm, because I like the idea of this guy getting into people's dreams and making them remember him. And Windows did just download an update, thank you very much for letting me know. It did pop up. Anyway, so let's see. Yes, there are prophecy-like powers. There are a lot of powers. This is one of those reasons, I can't go into every single one of the Arcanoi during character creation. I really can't, because there are a lot, and there are 2 powers for each level as well. You may even have found that influenced the way I design the disciplines in V5 with their branching. But nevertheless, it is the... it probably was my computer if you saw a pop-up appear on my screen. So let's have a look at what these powers do per guild, just to let you know what we've actually gone for here. So, as I flick through it, now is an absolutely fine time for you to go over to DriveThruRPG and buy these books for incredibly low prices, so that I don't have to read out every single Arcanos, and you can read them yourself. And what's more, while Werewolf 20 is probably my favourite book in terms of its content, Wraith 20 is my favourite one in terms of its art and layout. I am a big fan of Wraith 20, and what's more, I think it's a complete game. Book of Oblivion is fantastic, don't get me wrong, I loved co-developing it, but I think Wraith 20 has everything you need in it to run a game of Wraith, a very good one. So what do we have? We still haven't found our ones yet, but we will get there. Currently going through, there we go, the Mnemosyne. So, keys to the memory palace. Here's the first dot of Mnemosyne. Mnemosyne's foundational lessons give the Wraith conscious control of his own memories. By visualizing a metaphoric structure, whether it's a library or relational database, the Mnemosyne organizes his mind. This enables him to recall even the most trivial details that evaded his conscious notice at the time he formed the memory. You roll intelligence plus Mnemosyne, so we may want to put experience points in that at some point. There's also an initiate level for 1 dot, but looking at common, further reflection. Developed as a teaching tool, this art became essential to the Mnemosyne's historical work and later ensured the guild's continuity even as Stygia purged its leaders, etc., etc. The player spends 2 pathos and rolls charisma plus Mnemosyne. With success, the target experiences a sensory and emotional montage of the projected memories as she internalizes them. It's rarely apparent to her that they aren't her own memories, but her mind integrates them to the same extent. So basically it's a way of accumulating other people's memories and ingesting them into yourself so that you can basically gain from them and learn about them. It's a bit weird, but I like it. I like it a lot. In terms of communicating with the living, Zachary, pretty much every Wraith can do it if they pass through to the Skinlands. So, Agent 29416, you raise a very good point at this point about is Wraith a depressing game? And honestly, it depends. It depends entirely on whether you want to play it as a depressing game. I think people automatically jump to the conclusion that it is depressing because it surrounds death. But Rich Dansky, the developer of Wraith 2nd Edition and major developer of Wraith 20, has always maintained, and I agree with him, it's a game about hope. It's a game where your characters are forced to confront some of the things that they never got to do in life or some of their regrets from life, but it's a second chance for them to actually achieve it and make new bonds, new friends, new companions, lovers, families beyond death, or beyond life, I should say. I think that if you labour the point when playing this game that it's about suffering and misery and everything you've lost, then of course it will be depressing, but I think the same could go for any game. The fact is, and this may sound very trite for me to say, death itself doesn't need to be depressing. It can, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, be a relief. It can be something that gives closure to people, allows them to move on, and it's exactly the same in this game. You're playing a character whose life ended, but their existence didn't, and so they have a rare opportunity to make amends, do things they never had a chance to do in life, and all the while get to experience the sometimes scary but also wondrous underworld. So yes, we have a memory magpie that steals and utilises whatever thoughts can be tied. I think that is a wonderful way of saying I was not here. The best game for starter as a storyteller. Unfortunately, Nathaniel, and this is where I am saddest, to my knowledge, there aren't many pre-written Wraith Chronicles. It's something I would have loved to have changed if we had a chance to make more Wraith 20 books. I think more printed chronicles is always a good idea, but what that means is, as a storyteller and players, your best bet is to work together on your characters and form your story from that. The storyteller shouldn't necessarily have an idea in mind beyond broad brush strokes of the kind of events they want characters to go through, but the first thing you do is create characters, then you create a locality in the underworld in which they exist, some NPCs that want to push or pull them or influence them or just interact with them in a certain way, a threat, maybe minor, and another one far in the distance that may be major, maybe a journey. They have to take a boat across the Tempest, the raging sea of Oblivion, to go to another place, a distant shore, and encounter other wraiths, maybe find a wraith that's lost in the underworld and bring them back. You can be very simple. You can be as simple as you are with any other role-playing game, and that kind of story where there is maybe another wraith who is more prominent in your society. His child has grown up, died, and he believes strongly that this child has become a wraith but is all the way over there, over the sea. Now your adventure is to find them and bring them back in one piece, but maybe they've become a spectre. Maybe you also have to redeem them, bring them back to being a wraith. There's all kinds of things you can do that can be a mixture of personal and existential. So I think there's a lot you can do with Wraith the Oblivion. It doesn't all have to be about brooding, introspection. It doesn't. And I think that Wraith itself can be an incredibly upbeat game. You just need to let it be upbeat. You need to give moments of levity and make characters feel glad to have another chance. There is not a Wraith Jumpstart, but there is a book for the recently deceased, a handbook for the recently deceased. It's part of the sale, and that basically gives you intros to all these stories, how to run the game and how to play the game. And given that it's in the sale, I imagine it probably costs about 50 cents or something like that. It didn't cost much to begin with. So yes, the other arcanoi that this individual has, just to go through them so that people know what we picked for our character. We have Had to pick the ones right at the end, didn't we? Pandemonium. Weirdness. This Wraith inflicts a small strange effect on a single living target. The art subject may shiver from sudden chill, see a flicker of motion, etc., etc. Spends 1 pathos, rolls wits plus pandemonium. That's good. We're not hopeless at that. Also have befuddlement. The Wraith momentarily confuses a target, disorientating him and making him forget where he is and what he's doing. Spend 1 pathos, roll wits plus pandemonium. So just to show you what I mean about, hopefully you'll be able to see this well enough. You should hopefully be able to see that this book has 2 dots for each level, or 2 powers for each level of Arcani. And that's because you have common Arcani, any Wraith can access, and you have Arcani that in theory you can access if you join the guild that uses it, which are slightly more powerful and focused. It means you get more bang for your buck, basically. And finally we have Phantasm, which we only have 1 dot in. Sleep Sense. For a Wraith to spy on someone's dreams, the player rolls Perception plus Phantasm. Each success allows the Wraith to watch the dream for 1 turn. Nice and easy. 20 cents for the handbook for the recently deceased. Well, yeah, do pick it up. Honestly, do pick it up. It is worth your money. So, yeah, I think we're done except for freebie points now. So let's go back to our character creation and finish up, shall we? Freebie points. So, as always, attributes cost 5, Arcani cost 5, that's not much. Willpower 2, abilities 2, passions 2, backgrounds 1, fetters 1, pathos 1 per 2 dots, and corpus cannot be increased with freebie points. But it's 10. So the first thing I want to do is I want to build a little bit of notoriety. So we're down to 14. I also want this person to have a decent Eidolon. So we're down to 13. And I want them to have an interesting artifact about them. Maybe it is something that exists in the underworld because of their fraud. And they've got hold of it. It was there when their Reaper cut them from their call and introduced them to the underworld. There it was. Something that they formed through their actions in the Skinlands as a fake medium. So we spent 3 points on that. I'm happy with background, so we're currently on 12. Now to bump some of this up. Well, we know this person is a champion liar. So now to 10. And now we're down to 8. I'm going to spread this out a little more as well. Let's see, what else do we have access to? I don't think this person is a complete fool. So down to 6. I would say Book of Oblivion is a supplement worth having. Dream Asylum, because I co-developed it. It is a book of antagonists and more shadow options, all kinds of interesting things. Technology for cons. I don't see this person as much of a technologist when it comes to con artistry, I've got to be honest. I think that's put me down to 6 points. So let's bump this attribute up. So that is now 1 point remaining. So what can we spend 1 point on? A background, another fetter, or 1. Let's put another dot in Memoriam. Memoriam because he is remembered by his friends. Or not, no, that would be wrong. Remembered by his fans. There we go. So, that is our character. They would have 10 points of corpus at character creation. Now, finally, we need to come up with a name. What is our fake medium who may find religion in the afterlife? I mean, that's the last chance to do it, really. Going to be called. I do need to raise pathos by 2, don't I? No. Yes, I do for my Memoriam. Thank you very much for reminding me, Danny. So yeah, we need a character name. Let's see who comes up with something good. This has been a very long character creation session. Thank you very much for sticking with me throughout. I really appreciate it. Not John Edwards. Terence Atwater. Ooh, that's a nice, colourful name, Jason Schmidt. Yeah, we're not making John Edwards an actual John Edwards character. Gavin. Not enough characters called Gavin, are there? I'm going to go for Gavin Atwater. And Jack Valentine, another great name there, was his stage name. Boom, done. Gavin Atwater, aka Jack Valentine. When he was on stage communing with the dead, he claimed to be Jack Valentine. But in reality, he was just simple old Gavin. Okay, well, that is Jack Valentine, Gavin Atwater, in the bag, in the pocket, out of sight, out of mind. Wraith the Oblivion character is created, so I'm going to wrap up in the next 5 to 10 minutes. But before I do, I will first of all tell you not only is this game and Changeling 20 on sale right now on DriveThruRPG. You can get 90% off the price. It costs 10% to buy Wraith the Oblivion 20th Anniversary Edition, 10% of the price to buy Changeling the Dreaming 20th Anniversary Edition. It will end this weekend, this sale, so do take advantage while you can. But not only that, we also have some new releases, and it would be silly of me to not point out that you can still buy They Came From Beyond the Grave in print and PDF on DriveThruRPG, and I would love it if you did. This is me asking you now, if this has not satisfied your appetite for games, you can buy They Came From Beyond the Grave, which is a book I absolutely love, a game I loved working on, coming up with, and the team on it were fantastic, and it contains some wonderful pieces of art. I think the art in this game is absolutely top quality. We've got these wonderful full-page poster pieces that look like horror movies, and we've actually given titles to them as if they are horror movies. I think my favourite one is close to that one, The Deadly Departed. I do love the colour scheme in that one there. Agent 29416, yeah, I think Cthulhu Awakens is on Kickstarter right now. That's a Green Ronin game. Oh, and again, special prize to anyone who knows which movie that zombie is from. Anyway, They Came From Beyond the Grave. I know I mention it every single time, but that's because it's a game that is very, very special to me, and it would mean the world to me, and it will help me out if you buy a copy. So if you love your horror movies, it is a cinematic horror game. It is based mainly around the 1970s and 80s of horror, but don't let that restrict you. It has everything in it from Dracula to werewolves to the devil himself, and 5 archetypes you can play. What's more, last week we released They Came From Camp Murder Lake, which is our 1980s slasher book, and that has been doing very, very well. Do pick that up if you have some spare cash, because I think well, for my money, it's the best slasher game out on the market. Of course I would say that. But if you want to play a bunch of camp counselors being hunted, that's exactly what this game is for. You can, of course, play other horror games with it, but Camp Murder Lake is just a wonderful game, whether you're doing it as one-shots or a series of games, a series of episodes. You know, Friday the 13th, 1 through to however the hell many there have been. You could actually do that with Camp Murder Lake with ease. Anyway, so 5 minutes to go, and then I will retire. So if anyone's got any questions, now is the time to ask. Haven't heard the name Black Dynamite for a while. I think that's a fantastic movie. Haven't seen it for years. I'll have to watch it again. I threw that shit before I got in the room. Well, I know there's probably a little bit of a delay, but I'm not seeing any questions. So, any projects in the works, Dream Asylum? Yes. Do look out for They Came From Classified, and They Came From the Cyclops' Cave. That should be going to some kind of crowdfunding site near you soon as we can. So do check out theonyxpath.com. That's our cinematic espionage game and our cinematic fantasy game. in the They Came From universe. And as I always harp on about, the They Came From games are modular. You can cross them over without any breakage of rules. Easy. So yeah, very happy with them. Adam Brown, what happened to that folk horror game you're working on? I worked on Solemn Veil. It is all turned over to Mark Kelly, who is basically just finishing up the art and layout. By all means, get in touch with Mark, or Dirty Vortex, that's the name of the company that produced it, or is producing it. But yeah, it's all pretty much done and ready to go out, as well, in terms of the words, anyway. The Indecisiveness says, do you have any plans for Changing the Lost in the future? If there's a Changing the Lost sale, I will probably do a character creation for that. Nathaniel Lysmith says, what would you say is the scariest part of Wraith? Probably harrowings. Those are the times when generally you as a player will be at the mercy, or your character will be at the mercy of their shadow the most, and the horrors that will be pulled from their psyche, they'll be exposed to them. How in-depth you play these things is really down to the comfort levels of the group. But if you've been playing your character well and you've been building up various flaws through your play, then I think they can be very interesting. Will there be a change in character creation also, says Danny? That really depends on my availability in the week. We will have to see. Arbane says, any plans to add a 90s horror supplement to the They Came From series? Probably not. I mean, the 90s was pretty fallow. Is fallow the word? I'm barren for horror. I mean, Scream came out, and in a way, this game, Beyond the Grave, and especially Camp Murder Lake, is how Scream approaches it. It's very meta. Your characters probably know about horror movies, for instance. So I think Camp Murder Lake covers 80s and 90s already very well. Impulsive Sass, how would you develop Werewolf 5th Edition if you were lead developer on it? I probably shouldn't say. Because I was a contributing writer to Werewolf 5th Edition back when it was a Renegade game. Obviously Paradox took it back in-house. I know some of what 5th Edition contains, and it would be imprudent for me to say anything that I would or wouldn't do knowing what's going into it. One thing I would do, and I will say this quite outright, and this isn't me performing or anything, is one thing I managed to do myself and Leith Shields and the writers on the Apocalyptic Record for Werewolf 20, which is on Backakit. That's our Beckett's Jihad Diary for Werewolf. It did very well on Kickstarter. Is we really did away with the idea of white supremacist Get of Fenris. I think, or even racial supremacist or Aryan supremacist Get of Fenris. I know it was a particular camp, I think, within the Sword of Heimdall in the Get, or the Fenrir, at one point, and I just think they're a terrible idea. You can explore things like that within the Garou Nation with characters who more closely or distantly lean to or from the litany and so on, but it just makes no sense to me from a metaplot standpoint as well as a enjoyment standpoint to have werewolves who also happen to be Nazis. Because most Nazi ethos doesn't really make sense as a Garou, you know? I just think it's a terrible idea. I would not include that in the slightest in Werewolf 5th Edition if I had my way. Trevor Mersh says, any chance for digital character sheets for They Came From on Roll20 Fancy Grounds coming up in the future? I certainly hope so. Trevor, as you've asked that, please, I'm addressing you now, go on theonyxpath.com, go on the latest blog post on there, and leave a comment to that effect. Please. And it will help me remember. Favourite League of Gentlemen character, if we're talking about the BBC League of Gentlemen, probably... Oh, that's difficult, because I do love the League of Gentlemen. For now, I'm going to go for Bernice, the Vicar of Royston Vasey. If we're talking about the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, I will go for Captain Nemo. What's the next character you plan to make? If I get to do it this week, I'll do another Changeling 21. If it's next week, it'll be whatever's in the sale next week. What are your thoughts on balancing an abomination for a player character? Easy. Just if you want to play one. Use the traits that are in the game, and the balance issue will quickly be resolved by how much they are loathed, if you abide by metaplot, by both vampires and werewolves. Often I find if a player is desperate to play an ultra physically powerful character who is weighed down by a lot of social iniquity, then it kind of balances out because of what they're unable to do, you know? I think there's no need to punish a player. If there's a player who wants to play an abomination, you're happy to run a game for them, then you should accommodate that. But they should also be aware that the reason they're called abominations is because they're not well liked. Oh, I think I can probably agree with that, Danny. I mean, I'm hoping Nazis won't appear in it at all. Anyway, that's strange that it says Onyx Path's website isn't secure. Try it without the S in the HTTP and you'll get there straight away. So anyway, I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to turn in for the night. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching. I really appreciate it. Please buy They Came From Beyond the Grave and They Came From Camp Murder Lake. And remember, if you buy either of those two, send me an email via matthewdawkins.com. Tell me when you bought it, send me proof of purchase, and I will incorporate you into a game that I run for my Patreons. I'm doing that for people who are telling me that they've bought the game, can prove they bought it by just sending me a screenshot. I then invite them to Discord. I run a game for them and others like them, because I want people playing this game, and I realise I'm probably the best person. I'm in the best position to actually do that for them. So don't hesitate. If you want a game, $20 is all it's going to cost, because that not only gets you a full role-playing game, it also gets you a game with me. It's only going to be a one-shot. It's not my Patreon level where you get a consistent chronicle. But, you know, if you enjoy it, maybe you'll sign up for that. Thank you very much for watching, and have a good night, everybody.